It started on a Saturday evening, cold outside, quiet inside, the kind of night that used to feel like comfort. I remember it vividly because there was nothing unusual about it. Amanda was at a corporate dinner, one of those events she always said felt more like punishment than celebration. Her exact words earlier that week were, "It's just going to be a bunch of small talk and overpriced appetizers. Honestly, I'd rather be home." So I didn't think much of it. She'd been having a rough quarter at work, and I figured she deserved a break even if that break involved mandatory mingling with her boss and coworkers. I stayed home, ordered takeout, and watched a rerun of a game I'd already seen 3 times. That's how normal the evening was until she walked in. She got home around 10:30 p.m., the front door clicking open as I was loading the dishwasher. "Hey," I called out casually. "How was it?" She laughed as she stepped inside. Exactly as boring as I predicted. I swear, these people could make champagne and caviar feel like office coffee and a vending machine granola bar. I smiled. It was classic Amanda sarcastic, quick, tired of all the performative nonsense that came with her job in corporate sales. But as I turned to look at her, the smile didn't hold. She looked different. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Her coat, her hair, even her skin. It all smelled like cologne. Not just a trace of it, but strong, musky. It hit me the second she got close. It was definitely a man's cologne, not mine, not anything we had in the house. And it wasn't the kind of light scent that lingers in the air of a crowded event. It was close contact strong, as in someone had leaned in, someone had touched her. I didn't say anything, not right away. Instead, I noticed something else. There was a dark wine stain near the bottom hem of her coat. Not fresh, but still damp enough to catch the light. Burgundy red. She didn't seem to notice or care as she shrugged it off and tossed it casually over the back of the hallway chair. "Someone bumped into me," she said, almost as if reading my mind. "Some woman with an overly full glass of Merlot. It wasn't a big deal. I cleaned up in the bathroom." Her tone was light, dismissive, practiced. But it was when she leaned in to give me a kiss that the third detail hit me like a punch to the chest. There was a faint smudge on her neck right at the base where the collarbone meets the skin. Lipstick, a shade I'd never seen her wear. Dark, plum, something bolder than anything in her makeup drawer. I froze for half a second, maybe less, but I caught myself. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and decided to act like she didn't. "You smell like someone else's date," I joked, trying to keep my tone light. She laughed and waved her hand. "That cologne? Ugh, you should have smelled the guy sitting next to me. It was like he bathed in it. I think it seeped into my skin." She breezed past me into the kitchen, talking about how horrible the appetizers were, and how her boss, Richard, made yet another tone-deaf speech. I swear, he thinks he's some kind of Silicon Valley god. He kept dropping buzzwords like synergy and scale like they meant something. Her words were sharp, animated, deflective. I stood in the kitchen, listening, nodding, trying to convince myself that I was overthinking it, that I was being insecure, that Amanda, my Amanda, wouldn't do something like that. But the details didn't match the tone. She looked too put together. Her makeup was still flawless except for that single faint smudge on her neck. Her heels were still clean. Her eyes were glassy, not drunk, but not entirely sober either. "Did you guys go somewhere after?" I asked, keeping it casual. She shook her head as she poured herself some water. "No, I just stayed to talk with Richard and a few others. We were going over some last-minute stuff for next week's pitch. You know how it is. The kind of stuff they won't put in an email but will say after 2 glasses of wine." Something about that explanation felt too convenient, too neat. It checked all the boxes, wrapped all the loose ends before I could even ask the questions. And yet, the questions stayed. Why would another woman's lipstick end up on her neck? Why didn't she change or at least try to scrub off the wine stain? And why was she trying so hard to make everything seem routine? I helped her hang up the coat and said nothing more about it. I nodded along, smiled when it was appropriate, laughed when she joked about the food. But my thoughts didn't move on. They stayed locked on those tiny inconsistencies, each one small enough to be dismissed on its own, but together, forming something heavier. That night, after she went upstairs to take a shower, I stayed in the living room, staring at the hallway chair where her coat hung. I even walked over and picked it up, bringing it to my face. The scent was still there. Heavy, masculine, expensive. And then, out of some combination of instinct and foolishness, I checked the coat pocket. There was a folded paper napkin tucked inside. On it, a single word written in what looked like a rushed scrawl. Tonight, followed by a phone number. I felt my breath catch. My hand closed around the napkin, like it might dissolve if I didn't grip it hard enough. When Amanda came back down in her pajamas, hair damp, face clean of makeup, I slipped the napkin back where I found it. I didn't ask. I didn't say anything. I just watched her as she settled in next to me, curling up on the couch like nothing had happened. She leaned her head on my shoulder and sighed. Glad that's over. These things drain me. I nodded. Yeah, I bet. We sat like that for a while, me staring blankly at the TV, her scrolling through her phone. A silence between us that didn't feel new, but tonight, it felt different. It felt dishonest. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling while Amanda slept next to me, curled on her side like she always did. Her breathing was soft, steady, innocent. But I wasn't at peace. I kept running the timeline in my head, kept replaying her smile, her excuses, the scent of cologne, the lipstick, the napkin. Everything pointed to something she wasn't saying. I wanted to tell myself I was being paranoid, that I was looking for patterns where there weren't any. But deep down, I already knew. I didn't have proof. Not yet. But I knew. Because something inside me had shifted. Something I couldn't unsee. It didn't come with fireworks or a big dramatic reveal. It didn't come with yelling or accusations. It came with a scent, a stain, a smear of color that didn't belong. It came quietly in whispers. And that's how it starts, isn't it? Not with betrayal you can see clearly, but with the subtle unraveling of things that once felt solid. The next morning started like any other, but nothing felt normal. Amanda was in the kitchen, humming softly as she made coffee, moving through the motions like she always did. Toast in the oven, almond milk in her mug, checking her phone between sips. But I couldn't shake the feeling from the night before. I kept seeing the wine stain, smelling the cologne, and wondering about the lipstick that didn't belong. She caught me staring at her and smiled like everything was fine. You okay? Yeah, I said quickly. Just tired. She nodded, not pressing. That was the first time it hit me. She didn't want to press, because questions go both ways. She left for work around 8:30, dressed in one of her newer outfits, something sharp, expensive looking. Amanda used to wear comfortable sweaters and jeans when she didn't have client meetings. Lately, though, every outfit looked like it belonged on a runway. Dresses that used to be reserved for weddings or parties now showed up on weekday mornings. High heels replaced flats. Lipstick became a daily essential, not an occasional accessory. I sat on the edge of our bed after she left, turning things over in my mind. At first, everything had seemed explainable work stress, a big upcoming pitch, more late nights at the office. But now those reasons felt more like excuses. Carefully constructed cover stories I had accepted without thinking. That morning I started thinking. Over the next few hours, I found myself mentally rewinding the last few months, scenes and moments I'd ignored at the time, but now stood out like red flags I was too blind to see. The first thing I remembered was how often she started staying late at work. It had become normal. Richard needs help finalizing numbers. We're rehearsing for the pitch. It's just easier to work without distractions after everyone else has gone home. Those were the phrases I heard again and again. I believed them because I wanted to, but I couldn't ignore the pattern. She started coming home later, and later 9 p.m. turned to 10:30, then to midnight, sometimes even past 1 a.m. She always had a reason, and I never had proof that it was anything but work. I'd ask how it went, and she'd say, fine, long, boring. And then she'd collapse on the couch and zone out like her mind was somewhere else. I used to be part of her decompressing process. She'd vent about annoying clients, laugh about office politics, complain about Richard's clueless management style. But lately, she talked less. Much less. Sometimes not at all. And then there was the phone. Her phone used to be just a phone. It lived on the charger overnight, sat on the kitchen counter during dinner, was occasionally forgotten in her purse for hours at a time. But now, it never left her side. Ever. She took it into the bathroom when she showered. She turned it face down every time she set it on a table. If a notification buzzed and I happened to glance over, she'd immediately flip it over or swipe it away. I caught her texting late into the night, fingers moving quickly, screen brightness turned down. Once I woke up at 2 a.m. and saw her sitting in the hallway with the phone pressed to her ear, whispering. She said it was work-related. "Client freak out," she told me, annoyed that I had asked. "Go back to sleep." Even weekends had started to change. We used to have routines. Saturday morning breakfast at our favorite diner, afternoon drives to nowhere, lazy movie nights where we'd argue over what to watch but end up choosing the same old comedy every time. Those rituals meant something. They were ours. Now they were gone. I'd ask if she wanted to go out and she'd say she had errands. I'd suggest ordering in and she'd say she wasn't hungry. I'd put on a movie and she'd stay glued to her phone, claiming she had work to catch up on. She stopped laughing at the same jokes. She stopped asking me how my day was. And maybe the hardest part, I stopped asking her too. I didn't realize it until that morning, sitting alone in the silence of our house, but I'd slowly stopped trying. Somewhere between her excuses and my growing unease, I began pulling back. Not because I didn't love her, but because I was afraid of the answers I might get if I pushed. And maybe she noticed. Maybe that was part of it. It's a strange thing, feeling like a stranger in your own home. Like you're standing in a room full of memories that don't belong to you anymore. I walked into our living room and saw the framed photo of us from 3 years ago on our trip to San Diego. Her head was leaning on my shoulder, our smiles wide and real. I stared at it for a long time. That trip felt like another life. That afternoon, I cleaned the garage just to get out of my own head. I found a box of old letters Amanda had written me back when we were still dating back, when love felt simple, not something that needed decoding. She used to leave notes in my lunch bag, scribble little "I miss you" messages on Post-its stuck to the bathroom mirror. Those gestures had disappeared months ago. I sat there on the cold concrete floor, holding one of the notes. "Can't wait to come home to you. You make the worst days better." I felt my chest tighten. Where had that woman gone? More importantly, who had taken her place? The changes weren't just emotional. She had started working out more, something I would have normally supported. She signed up for Pilates classes, bought new gym clothes, downloaded a food tracking app, all of which could have been totally innocent. People grow, people evolve, but combined with everything else, it started to feel like she was trying to become someone new, someone I wasn't part of. Once I complimented her on a new dress. She smiled politely and said, "Thanks, Richard noticed too." I don't think she even realized she said it. Richard. That name kept showing up more and more. Richard liked the proposal. Richard said my presentation was the strongest. Richard wants me to join him for a client dinner. At first, I was happy for her. She was getting recognition, something she'd worked hard for. But then I noticed how often it was just the two of them. Dinners, late nights, meetings that didn't make the calendar. She even started mentioning him in casual conversation, like he had become part of her daily life in a way that sounded familiar. Too familiar. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Amanda never used to talk about any of her coworkers outside of work hours. Now Richard was practically a fixture. Still, I told myself I was being unfair, paranoid, jealous for no reason. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband checking his wife's phone, reading into every shift in tone. I wanted to be better than that. I wanted to trust her. But trust isn't something you can force. It's not a box you tick because you're supposed to. It has to be earned every day. And lately, Amanda hadn't earned it. She had avoided it, dodged it. That evening when she came home, I watched her more closely. Her smile was just as bright, her kiss just as quick. She asked about my day, and I gave her the usual answer. She nodded and went upstairs. I stayed on the couch, staring at the same TV screen I hadn't been watching. When she came back down to make tea, I asked, "Hey, when's your next late night at work?" She paused just for a second. "Not sure yet. Probably midweek. Richard's trying to finalize things before the deadline. I nodded. Makes sense. She smiled. Don't wait up for me. I said nothing. But inside, the pieces were starting to fall into place. The absence of things once normal, the presence of new patterns, the wall she was building between us, brick by brick. It didn't look like cheating yet. Not exactly. But it didn't look like love anymore either. Sunday evening, I remember it clearly, not because anything spectacular happened, but because of how quiet the world seemed right before it shattered. Amanda had told me she needed to go into the office again. Another late-night session to prep for a critical Monday presentation with her team led Richard, the same name that had slowly wormed its way into nearly every one of her recent stories. At this point, I was no longer questioning whether something was off. I knew it was. But suspicion alone is a terrible place to live. You can't sleep in it. You can't breathe in it. You either need to believe the lie fully or face the truth. There's no middle ground. So I chose the truth. A few months earlier, I had helped Amanda set up a small office security system when she got promoted motion-activated cameras that recorded whenever someone entered after hours. It wasn't high-tech or fancy, but it synced to an app on her phone, and unbeknownst to her, mine too. We had set it up together, and she'd never asked me to disconnect. That Sunday, as soon as she left the house, I opened the app. The feed was quiet at first, nothing but empty elevator lobbies and office corridors. I waited. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Just as I was beginning to question whether she'd even gone in, the elevator camera pinged. There she was. Amanda stepped out of the elevator alone, dressed in a deep blue blouse tucked into a black skirt, one I hadn't seen before. Her makeup was done with more care than usual, and her hair was pinned back in soft waves. She looked elegant, more like someone heading to a cocktail party than preparing a PowerPoint deck. My stomach turned. She walked with purpose down the hallway toward the office suite, and right before reaching the door, another figure entered the frame. Richard. He was dressed in a tailored shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled to the elbows. Casual but not lazy, he was waiting for her, smiling. As Amanda approached, he placed his hand gently, almost too familiarly, on her lower back, guiding her inside. They didn't speak, at least not that the camera could capture, but the body language said enough. I tapped the feed for the interior office mic. It didn't pick up much at first, just the door clicking shut, faint movements, the sound of drawers or chairs. Then, laughter. Hers first, then his. Warm, private, layered with something I hadn't heard from her in months. Joy. I turned up the volume. What followed was a muffled exchange, hard to make out, words blurred by walls and echoes. But there were phrases that slipped through. You didn't have to wear that for me. I wanted to. You're impossible. Silence. Movement. Something shifting against a desk or table. And then, it happened. It started with the sound of her voice quiet, breathy. Then Richard's low murmur. More movement. A pause. And finally unmistakable sounds. Soft at first, then rhythmic. Not loud, not pornographic, but intimate, real. Sounds I couldn't pretend were anything else. I stared at the screen, frozen. I didn't feel rage. Not right away. I didn't scream or throw anything. There was no outburst, just a terrifying stillness, like someone had cut the audio on my own life. Because there it was, the thing I had feared, the answer to every question I'd been too afraid to ask. The reason the cologne smelled so strong, the reason the wine stain didn't matter, the reason her phone never left her hand. It was all here in a handful of grainy frames and a string of muffled sounds that no husband should ever have to listen to. I let the feed run a little longer, not out of morbid curiosity, but because I needed to be sure. Needed to let it burn all the way through. If there was any remaining doubt, it needed to die here, in front of this screen. When it was over, they stayed in the office for nearly another hour. No more laughter, no more movement, just quiet conversation. At one point, Amanda leaned back in her chair, her head tilted toward Richard like she was basking in the calm that followed a storm. I'd seen that look before, but not recently. It used to be meant for me. That's when I saved the recording. Not for revenge, not for leverage, not to throw in her face. I saved it because I needed something concrete, something to anchor me to the reality I now had to live in. Doubt can drive a man insane, but truth, however painful, is a kind of freedom. I sat back on the couch, the glow of the TV playing to an empty room. The world outside felt muffled, like I was behind glass. I replayed everything in my mind: the late nights, the sudden wardrobe upgrades, the distant look in her eyes when we talked, how quick she was to pick fights over nothing. I had once thought we were drifting apart. Now I saw she was already gone. My phone buzzed, a message from her. "Don't wait up. Probably working late again. Might just crash at the office if it gets too late. Love you." The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. Love you, 3 words tossed in like an afterthought. A reflex. How could she send that, knowing what she had just done? Or was that the point? Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was habit. I stared at the message for a long time, then locked the screen. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I lay on the living room couch, watching the ceiling spin, wondering what version of Amanda would walk through the door the next morning. Would she look tired? Would she try to touch me, kiss me, wrap herself around me like nothing had changed? Would I let her? The morning came slowly. I heard her come in around 5:15 a.m. The door opened with a soft creak. She tiptoed in, trying not to wake me. I stayed still. She paused when she saw me on the couch. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. I didn't respond. She stood there for a moment longer, then padded upstairs. I waited until I heard the shower running before I got up, walked to the front door, stared at her shoes, those sleek black heels she wore for Richard, and lined them beside the others like nothing had happened. But everything had. I didn't confront her. Not that day, not yet, because now I wasn't acting from emotion. I wasn't chasing proof or clinging to illusions. I had it. All of it. I didn't need her to confess. I needed to decide what came next. And that decision had to come from a place of clarity, not chaos. People think that when you catch your partner cheating, you explode, break furniture, scream until your throat bleeds, throw them out and burn the evidence. But it's not like that, at least not for me. It's colder, quieter. The morning after I watched Amanda and Richard in that office, I didn't feel rage. I felt empty, hollowed out, like someone had taken a scoop to my insides and left just enough behind to keep me breathing. It was a kind of clarity I hadn't known before, like someone wiped fog from a window I'd been staring through for years. There was no what if left, no more benefit of the doubt. No more waiting for her to come clean. The marriage, whatever was left of it, was now built entirely on a lie. And not just the betrayal itself, but the months of effort she had put into maintaining the illusion. That was what stuck with me the most. Not the SX, not Richard, the deception. That day I functioned like a machine. Showered, shaved, dressed, ate breakfast I couldn't taste, sat in work meetings I couldn't remember. It felt surreal, how the world just kept turning, like I was supposed to play my part in a life that had quietly expired. Amanda texted me at lunch. "Crazy morning already. How's your day going?" I stared at the message, wondering how long she could keep this up. How long she thought she could live in both worlds, the one where she was a loyal wife and the one where she snuck around with another man after dark. I didn't reply. Later that evening, she came home earlier than usual. She looked tired, maybe guilty. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted Thai for dinner. I said sure. We sat on the couch and ate noodles while watching a show we'd seen 100 times. She leaned against me. She laughed at a joke. She passed me the remote. It all looked so normal, so painfully fake. She had no idea. That night after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I didn't Google how to catch a cheating spouse. I didn't need to. I already had the truth. What I searched for instead was direction. I looked up divorce attorneys, read articles on financial separation, scanned forums where people told their stories about walking away. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a fool for being here. I felt like a man who was finally seeing things as they were. There was a calmness in it, a dark kind of peace. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to confront her with evidence and demand an explanation she'd already rehearsed 10 times in her head. I was going to prepare, quietly, thoroughly, strategically. Because here's the thing, once you know the truth, you stop chasing answers. You start preparing for consequences. The next few days were strange. She acted as if nothing had changed. She texted me during work, kissed me goodbye in the mornings, laughed when we watched TV. There were even a few random gestures, little things she hadn't done in months. She brought home my favorite coffee one morning, left a sticky note on the bathroom mirror that read, "Thank you for being patient with me lately. I love you." It didn't warm me. It didn't move me. It infuriated me in a way I didn't show. Because now every sweet gesture felt like manipulation. Every "I love you" felt like a decoy. A way to keep me grounded while she flew off to someone else's arms at night. It wasn't guilt, it was maintenance. She was trying to preserve the illusion. And maybe in some twisted way, she wanted both lives to coexist. The stable home life and the thrill of a secret lover. She wanted my loyalty and his attention, my silence in his hands. But she couldn't have both, and I was done pretending she could. So I took notes, not literally, but mentally. I started observing her like a stranger would. I watched how she checked her phone constantly between 10 p.m. and midnight, how she'd smile at something on her screen, then quickly set it face down when I glanced over. I noticed how she was never quite present, always half a second too slow to respond, like her mind was somewhere else, with him, her boss, Richard. I started calling him that in my head now, not by his first name, not as a neutral figure, just her boss. Like a title of betrayal. One night she told me she had to work late again. "Another pitch, huh?" she said. "Richard's making me fine-tune the projections. He's being extra annoying this week." I nodded. "Makes sense." She tilted her head. "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired." She smiled and kissed my forehead. "Don't wait up." She said it gently, like a favor, as if it was an act of mercy not to expect her. That night, I didn't check the office camera. I didn't want to watch again. I didn't need to. I already knew where she was, what she was doing. I didn't need to torture myself further. What I needed now wasn't evidence. It was distance, planning, control. So instead of watching her, I spent the evening cleaning out the guest room, reorganizing paperwork, making copies of our financials, password protecting my documents, calling a lawyer and scheduling a consult, setting up a separate bank account. I wasn't making threats, I was making exits. By the time Amanda got home that night around 1 a.m., I was already in bed pretending to sleep. She crept into the room thinking I didn't stir. I could feel her watching me in the dark. Maybe she wanted to say something. Maybe she thought I knew. Maybe deep down she wanted to get caught. But I didn't move. Didn't speak, because now I had nothing to say. The next day, I made one final move. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time, Carol. Richard's wife. We'd only met a couple times. A work barbecue, a Christmas party. She was kind, soft-spoken, a little reserved. I didn't know much about her except that Amanda always said she was too quiet and a little cold. Now, I saw those descriptions differently. Maybe Carol wasn't cold. Maybe she just knew more than she let on. I found her profile online, reached out, and asked if we could talk, just the two of us. I didn't say much, just enough to get her attention. She agreed. We met at a coffee shop 2 towns over neutral ground. I brought my laptop with the saved recording. I didn't describe it over text. I didn't try to cushion the blow. I simply asked if she wanted to see something I believed she deserved to know. When I played the video, she didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She didn't ask questions. She watched, silently. When it ended, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "I knew something was wrong. I just didn't think it was this." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence only 2 people can share when they've both been made fools of by the same lie. Eventually, she looked up at me and asked, "What are you going to do?" I told her the truth. "I'm going to end it, quietly, without drama, but not without consequences." She nodded. "Let me know when." I looked at her and said, "I want you there." And that's when the idea took shape. A dinner. One final moment of exposure, not loud or chaotic, but sharp, clean, honest. Amanda wouldn't see it coming, and that was the point. She'd built this web believing she could control the story, twist it, manipulate it, redirect suspicion until I doubted myself. But there's one thing lies can never survive: the presence of another betrayed spouse. Not when they're sitting across the table, saying nothing at all. I chose Thursday. Amanda had already told me earlier in the week that she'd be home late, another strategy session with Richard. The lie was becoming routine now, almost boring in how lazily it was delivered. Her voice didn't even carry the guilt anymore. Just efficiency. "I'll probably be home around 10. Don't wait up," she said, slipping on her heels and spritzing perfume in the hallway mirror. I nodded. "Be safe." She paused, looked at me for half a second too long, like she was waiting for a sign that I might suspect something. But I gave her nothing. She left with a smile. As soon as I heard the front door click shut and the soft purr of her car pulling away from the driveway, I moved. Everything was already in place. I'd spent the last few days preparing, cleaning the house, setting the table, making sure everything was just right. I even opened a bottle of wine I knew she liked, not to make her feel at home, but to keep the illusion alive for just a few minutes longer. Carol arrived exactly on time. She stepped out of her car dressed simply, no makeup, hair tied back, no jewelry. Just quiet resolve. She didn't need to make a statement with her appearance. Her presence alone was enough. She looked at me when I opened the door and said, "You ready?" I nodded. We didn't talk much as she stepped inside. I took her coat, offered her a glass of water. She declined and gestured toward the dining table where two places had been set, one across from the other. The third was left empty, waiting. The room was silent, like it was holding its breath. I sat down across from her. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. Our eyes did the talking. What had started as shared suspicion had